What does it feel like to be completely erased, to stand beside the man you've built a life with, only to be treated like a beige wall he's leaning against? For Amelia Reed, this wasn't just a feeling, it was her reality. Her husband Mark, a man obsessed with his own reflection, had polished every part of his life to a brilliant shine except for her. He called her dependable, steady, plain. But he made a fatal miscalculation. He thought the fire in her had gone out, when in reality, he was just standing in its light. This is the story of what happens when the plain woman he discarded steps out of the shadows and into a world he can only dream of. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Hyatt Ballroom in New York City dripped light onto the city's financial elite. Men in bespoke Brioni suits laughed their voices a low, confident rumble, while women adorned in diamonds and silks shimmered like constellations brought to earth. And then there was Amelia Reed. She stood beside her husband, Mark Thompson, clutching a small, simple black clutch. Her dress was a muted taupe, elegant and impeccably tailored, but designed not to be noticed. It was her uniform, the armor she wore to deflect attention, to glide through these events as a silent appendage to the man she loved, or the man she once thought she loved. Mark, my boy. A portly man with a booming voice, one of the senior partners at Mark's investment firm, clapped him on the shoulder. Killing it with the sterling acquisition, I hear. Absolutely killing it. Just doing my part. Robert, Mark said, his smile wide and practiced. It was a smile Amelia had once found charming, but now she saw the mechanics of it, a slight crinkle at the eyes to feign sincerity, a flash of perfectly white teeth to project a success. He didn't introduce her. He rarely did unless prompted. She was just there, a silent testament to his supposed stability. Amelia offered a small, polite smile to Robert, who gave her a cursory nod before turning his full, undivided attention back to Mark. They launched into a discussion of market caps and leveraged buyouts, their words a foreign language Amelia had long ago stopped trying to learn. She took a slow sip of her champagne, the bubbles fizzing meaninglessly on her tongue. She scanned the room. Everywhere she looked, she saw vibrant life. Women engaged in animated conversation, their laughter echoing. They were lawyers, artists, entrepreneurs. They had opinions, passions, a presence that filled their space. Amelia felt like a ghost haunting the edges of her own life. She had been an architectural designer when she met Mark, a good one. Her portfolio was filled with innovative, human-centric designs that prioritized light and natural materials. She dreamed of creating spaces that felt alive, but Mark's world had no room for her dreams. Architecture. It's a nice hobby, Ames, he'd said early in their marriage, patting her hand condescendingly. But my career needs to be the focus. We need to be strategic. So she had strategically folded herself smaller and smaller. Her drafting table in their spacious Upper East Side apartment gathered dust, eventually being replaced by a sleek, minimalist console table Mark had picked out. Her hobby was reduced to occasional freelance work on uninspired kitchen remodels for friends of her mother projects that paid the bills for her art supplies but starved her soul. She had convinced herself it was a sacrifice for their future, for his success, which he always promised was their success. A woman with fiery red hair and a dress the color of a peacock's feather sashayed over to them. Her name was Jessica, a new marketing VP from another firm who had been circling Mark at these events for months. Mark, darling, she purred, placing a hand on his arm. Amelia noted that her nails were a perfect blood-red stiletto. That was a brilliant move, shorting that tech stock before the announcement. I lost a fortune betting against you. She said it like a compliment, a flirtatious admission of his superiority. You have to know when to hold 'em and when to fold 'em, Mark quipped, his chest puffing out. He finally seemed to remember Amelia was there. Jessica, this is my wife, Amelia. The words were flat, perfunctory. An itemization, not an introduction. Oh, Lovely to meet you, Jessica said, her eyes flicking over Amelia's muted dress with a speed that was almost insulting. The appraisal was instantaneous and dismissive. Not a threat. Not important. That's a very classic dress. Thank you, Amelia replied, her voice quieter than she intended. Jessica immediately turned back to Mark. So, are you going to be in the Hamptons for the regatta I'm crewing on my father's yacht? As they spoke, Amelia felt a familiar cold dread wash over her. It wasn't jealousy. It was a profound sense of erasure. She wasn't a participant in this life. She was scenery. Mark had carefully curated every aspect of his existence: the apartment, the car, the friends, the career. And he had curated his wife to be the perfect, unobtrusive backdrop. Plain, dependable, and utterly silent. Later that evening, the final crushing blow landed. Amelia had stepped away to the powder room, needing a moment of quiet. As she walked back toward the ballroom, she overheard Mark's voice from a small alcove where he stood with two of his colleagues. She paused behind a large floral arrangement, her heart beginning to pound. Seriously, Mark, how's Amelia doing? One of the men asked. It was a genuine question from a colleague whose wife was friends with Amelia. We haven't seen her much. Is she still doing her design work? Amelia held her breath, a flicker of hope igniting within her. Maybe he would say something kind. Maybe he would acknowledge her talent, even in private. Mark chuckled. It was a dry, dismissive sound. Oh, you know Amelia. She dabbles. A little sketch here, a little project there. It keeps her busy while I'm at the office. Honestly, it's a relief she has something to do. She's not exactly built for the fast lane. She's plain, simple, but loyal, like a good golden retriever. The air left Amelia's lungs. A good golden retriever. The comparison was so cruel, so demeaning, it felt like a physical slap. The men laughed politely, and the conversation moved on. But Amelia was frozen, plain, simple, loyal. He hadn't said it to be vicious. He had said it as a statement of fact, a casual observation about a piece of his property. In that moment, the last 10 years of her life replayed in her mind every sacrificed dream, every bitten tongue, every beige dress bought to please him. It hadn't been a partnership. It had been an erasure. She didn't confront him. She didn't cause a scene. She walked back to his side, her face a perfect placid mask. She endured the rest of the evening, smiling when required, nodding at the appropriate times. But inside, a tectonic shift had occurred. The woman who had walked into that ballroom was not the same one who would leave it. When they arrived home at their sterile Mark-approved apartment, he tossed his keys into a glass bowl with a clatter. "Good night," he said, already loosening his tie. "Productive evening. Robert is primed to talk about my bonus." Amelia stood in the center of the living room, her black clutch held tight. "Mark," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the silence. He stopped, surprised by her tone. "Yeah, I want a divorce." He turned around slowly, a look of utter disbelief on his face. "A what? Are you joking? Did you have too much champagne?" "No," she said, her gaze unwavering. "I am perfectly sober, and I am completely serious. I've been thinking about it for a long time, but tonight, you made things very clear for me." Mark stared at her, genuinely baffled. He looked around the apartment at the life he had built, as if trying to find the source of the malfunction. "Clear about what? We have a great life. I provide for you. You have everything you could ever want." "No." "Mark." Amelia said, a sad smile, touching her lips for the first time that night. "You have everything you could ever want. I, on the other hand, have become nothing at all." He saw the resolve in her eyes, the finality in her stance, and for the first time he looked at her, not as a piece of furniture, but as a person. And he didn't seem to recognize her at all. The golden retriever had finally let go of the leash. The divorce was surprisingly swift. Mark, ever the pragmatist, treated it like a hostile takeover of a failing asset. His lawyers were ruthless, framing Amelia's request as an emotional, irrational whim. He fought to protect his wealth, his image. In the end, Amelia didn't fight back. She didn't want his money. She wanted her freedom. She walked away with a modest settlement enough to secure a small apartment and live for a year if she was frugal and her maiden name back. Amelia Reed. It felt like breathing again after being underwater for a decade. Her new apartment was a small one-bedroom in Brooklyn, overlooking a street lined with brownstones and noisy, vibrant life. It was a fraction of the size of her old home, but it was entirely hers. The first thing she did was paint the main wall a deep, daring shade of emerald green. Mark would have hated it. She loved it. For the first month she grieved. Not for Mark, but for the woman she had lost over the years. She went through her closet and packed up a decade's worth of beige grey and taupe. She donated the sensible shoes, the understated jewellery, the clothes of a woman trying to disappear. It was a funeral for her old self. Then the rebirth began. She bought a pair of bright yellow heels she saw in a shop window. She got a haircut, trading her long straight hair for a chic, asymmetrical bob that framed her face and highlighted her high cheekbones. She started spending her days in museums, the Met, the MoMA, the Guggenheim, reawakening the artistic eye she had allowed to atrophy. She found her old drafting table in storage, its surface scarred with the ghosts of old projects. She set it up by the large window in her living room, the emerald green wall behind it. She bought new pens, new rulers, fresh rolls of vellum. She sat down, took a deep breath, and began to draw. At first, her hands felt clumsy, her ideas derivative. The voice of Mark was a persistent whisper in her ear. "You're just dabbling. This is a hobby. You're not good enough for the fast lane." Doubt was a thick fog blurring her vision. She started small, redesigning her own tiny apartment, creating clever storage solutions and multifunctional furniture. It was an exercise, a way to reclaim her creative muscles. Her best friend Sarah, a sharp-witted journalist who had never liked Mark, was her biggest champion. "Look at this place, Ames," Sarah said, perched on a custom-built window seat Amelia had designed, which also served as a bookshelf. "This is brilliant. You've made 6 square feet feel like 1,200. You need to be doing this for a living." "I'm trying," Amelia admitted, frustration coloring her tone. "I started Reed Designs. I have a website, a portfolio, but the clients I'm getting want me to copy a look from Pinterest. They want shiplap and farmhouse sinks. No one wants innovation." She was barely making ends meet. The settlement was dwindling faster than she'd anticipated. The fear was real, a knot in her stomach that tightened every time she paid a bill. There were dark nights when she lay awake wondering if Mark had been right all along. Maybe she was just average. Maybe her dreams were bigger than her talent. One rainy Tuesday, scrolling through architectural journals online, she found it. A competition. The Van Allen Institute was partnering with the city to sponsor a design challenge for a new mixed-use community hub in a neglected part of the Bronx. The brief was ambitious. It had to be sustainable, community-focused, and architecturally significant. The prize was a substantial grant, and more importantly, a commission to oversee the project. It felt impossible. The biggest firms in New York would be competing. Who was she? A woman working from her one-bedroom apartment with a portfolio of kitchen remodels. Mark's voice returned. "Don't embarrass yourself, Amelia. Stay in your lane." But then another voice, her own, rose to meet it. What lane, she thought. "I don't have a lane anymore. I have a blank canvas." For the next 6 weeks, Amelia lived and breathed the project. She visited the site in the Bronx, talking to residents, to shop owners, to the kids playing basketball in the cracked courts. She didn't just want to build a structure, she wanted to create a heart for the neighborhood. Her design was unlike anything she had ever done. It was audacious. She envisioned a building that seemed to grow out of the ground, with cascading green roofs that served as urban farms. The southern facade was a living wall of solar panels and hydroponic gardens. Inside, spaces flowed into one another: a library, a daycare, a makerspace, a performance hall, and a rooftop cafe. It was a self-contained ecosystem designed to serve the community and heal the environment. It was everything she believed architecture could be. She worked until 3 a.m., most nights fueled by coffee and a terrifying, exhilarating sense of purpose. Her apartment was littered with sketches, models, and material samples. She poured every last drop of her talent, her passion, and her dwindling savings into the submission. She hired a small firm to do the 3D renderings, a necessary expense that left her bank account dangerously low. The day she submitted the proposal online, she felt a profound sense of emptiness. She had given it her all. Now there was nothing to do but wait. The weeks that followed were agonizing. She took on a small, soul-crushing freelance job designing a dentist's waiting room to pay her rent. Every email notification made her heart leap into her throat. She heard through the grapevine that Mark was thriving. He had been promoted to vice president and was often pictured in society columns with Jessica the Peacock Feather Woman on his arm. They were the new power couple. He had moved on without a backward glance. One afternoon, an official-looking email landed in her inbox. The subject line read, "Van Allen Institute Design Competition." Her hands trembled as she clicked it open. She braced herself for the polite, formulaic rejection. Her eyes scanned the text, searching for the inevitable, "While your design was impressive, we regret to inform you." But the words weren't there. Instead, she read, "Dear Ms. Reed, on behalf of the judging committee, it is with immense pleasure that we inform you that your proposal, the Bronx biome, has been selected as the winning entry." Amelia read the sentence again and again. The words blurred through a sudden film of tears. She had won. Against all odds, against the biggest names in the industry, she had won. Her design, her audacious, impossible dream, was going to be built. She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. The little voice of doubt, Mark's voice, was finally blessedly silent. She looked around her small apartment at the emerald green wall, at her scarred drafting table bathed in the afternoon light. It wasn't a place of defeat. It was her command center. It was where Amelia Reed had finally started building a life of her own design. Winning the competition was like stepping through a door into a different reality. One day, Amelia was struggling to pay her electricity bill. The next, her name was in the New York Times Architectural Digest and a dozen other publications. Reed Designs was once a name on a bare-bones website, was suddenly the subject of intense industry buzz. The real shift, however, came in the form of a man named Alexander Hawthorne. He was a legend in the world of real estate and development, but he was nothing like the brash loudmen Amelia knew from Mark's world. Hawthorne, the CEO of Hawthorne Global, was a visionary. His company didn't just build skyscrapers, they built landmarks. They were known for their commitment to cutting-edge design and sustainability, creating buildings that were as beautiful as they were revolutionary. He was also, Amelia learned, the head of the competition's judging committee. A week after the announcement, she received a formal letter, not an email, on thick cream-colored stationery embossed with the Hawthorne Global logo. It was a request for a meeting. Amelia spent 2 days preparing. She bought a new suit, not a safe, apologetic one, but a sharply tailored navy blue pantsuit that radiated quiet confidence. She knew her design inside and out, but she researched Hawthorne Global's entire portfolio, studying their ethos, their materials, their long-term vision. She would not be dabbling in this meeting. The Hawthorne Global headquarters occupied the top 10 floors of a sleek glass tower overlooking Central Park. The reception area was a masterpiece of minimalist design, all clean lines, natural stone, and a stunning view of the city that seemed to stretch into infinity. It was intimidating, but it also felt to Amelia's designer eye like coming home. She was led not to a sterile conference room, but to what looked like a private study. Bookshelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with volumes on architecture, philosophy, and art. A large oak desk sat before a panoramic window, but the man standing there was not behind it. He was by a small table examining a maquette of a building. Alexander Hawthorne was in his late 40s, with salt and pepper hair and intelligent, discerning eyes. He wore a simple grey cashmere sweater and dark trousers, no tie. He radiated an aura of calm, focused power, the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. "Ms. Reed," he said, his voice a low baritone. He turned and extended a hand. His handshake was firm, his gaze direct. "Alexander Hawthorne, thank you for coming. Mr. Hawthorne." "It's an honor," Amelia replied, surprised at how steady her own voice was. "Please call me Alexander." "Mr. Hawthorne makes me sound like my father," he said with a slight smile. "Your design, the Bronx biome, it was without a doubt the most exciting proposal I've seen in a decade." He wasn't flattering her. It was a statement of fact delivered with the precision of an expert. "Most firms submitted a variation on what they thought we wanted to see." He continued, gesturing for her to sit in one of the leather armchairs. "Safe, predictable, cost-effective. You submitted a philosophy. You didn't just design a building, you designed a future. Tell me about the cascading gardens. What was your inspiration?" For the next hour, they didn't talk about budgets or timelines. They talked about design. He challenged her, questioned her, pushed her to defend her choices. He wanted to know why she chose certain materials, what she wanted people to feel when they walked through the space. He saw the intricate details. She had poured her soul into the details. No one else had even noticed. He saw her. "You have a rare talent, Amelia," he said, his expression serious. "A voice. Don't ever let a client or a committee force you to quiet it." The words landed in the exact same spot where Mark's golden retriever comment had left a scar and began to heal it. At the end of the meeting, he leaned forward. "The Bronx Project is a wonderful start. It will change that community, and I suspect your career. But I have something else in mind, something on a much larger scale." He turned a large monitor on his desk towards her. An image of a pristine turquoise coastline appeared. "This is a private peninsula in Monaco. We have acquired the land for our next flagship resort, Hawthorne Elysian. The mandate is for it to be the world's first truly carbon-neutral luxury resort, a benchmark for the entire industry." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a project, it was a legacy. The board has a shortlist of the usual suspects: Pritzker Prize winners, star architects with global firms. Alexander said, his eyes fixed on her. "I told them it was a waste of time. Their ideas are stale. I believe the vision for this project is already in this room. I want Reed Designs to be the lead architect for Hawthorne Elysian." Amelia was speechless. A project of this magnitude would normally go to a firm with hundreds of employees, not a woman working out of a Brooklyn apartment. It was an insane, audacious leap of faith. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "My firm is just me. I don't have the infrastructure." "Infrastructure can be built," Alexander countered smoothly. "Hawthorne Global will provide all the support you need: engineers, project set managers, administrative staff. What we can't provide, what no one else on that shortlist can provide, is your vision. That is uniquely yours." He paused, his gaze intense. "The question is, Amelia, are you ready to think on this scale? Are you ready to build a landmark?" Mark's voice echoed one last time. "She's not built for the fast lane." Amelia looked at Alexander Hawthorne, a man who didn't see her as plain or simple, but as a visionary. She looked at the image of the Monaco coastline, a blank canvas of infinite possibility. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and met his gaze without flinching. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with a confidence she hadn't felt in a decade. "I am." The contract she signed the following week was staggering. Reed Designs was given an operational budget that made her head spin and a design fee that was life-altering. But more than the money, it was the trust. Alexander Hawthorne wasn't just her client. He was becoming her mentor, her champion. Their work became an intense, exhilarating collaboration. They flew to Monaco to walk the site. They had late-night video calls debating the merits of geothermal heating versus solar convection. He pushed her to be bolder, bigger. She in turn challenged his assumptions about luxury, convincing him that true luxury was sustainability and seamless integration with nature. A mutual respect grew between them, a professional intimacy built on shared passion and intellect. Amelia was no longer just a designer. She was the head of a major international project. She hired a small, brilliant team, moved Reed Designs into a chic Soho office, and found herself working harder and feeling more alive than ever before. She was in the fast lane now, and she wasn't just keeping up. She was setting the pace. She rarely thought of Mark. He belonged to a different lifetime, a black and white film she had walked out of. She was living in vibrant, breathtaking color now. She had no idea that their two worlds were about to collide in the most public and spectacular way imaginable. The biting February wind whipped across the tarmac at Teterboro Airport, the exclusive hub for New Jersey's private aviation scene. The air smelled of jet fuel and money. Mark Thompson stood impatiently in the lounge of a charter service, feeling pleased with himself. He was flying to Aspen for a boys' weekend with some clients, a calculated networking opportunity disguised as leisure. The charter wasn't top tier, not a Gulfstream, but it was a private jet, nonetheless a necessary prop in the theatre of his success. Beside him, Jessica shivered dramatically in her fur-trimmed white ski jacket, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled. "Mark, darling, how much longer I'm freezing, and the complimentary champagne is frankly subpar." "Patience, Jess," Mark said, adjusting his Rolex. "They're just finishing fueling." He scanned the lounge, subtly checking to see who else was there, who might be watching. Image was everything. He had been promoted. He was dating a woman who looked like she belonged on the cover of a magazine, and he was flying private. By all accounts, he was winning. That's when he saw her. A woman walked into the lounge, her posture poised and confident. She wore a long, camel-colored cashmere coat that draped elegantly over her frame. Tailored black trousers and heeled leather boots that clicked purposefully on the polished floor. Her face was partially obscured by large dark sunglasses, but there was something about her, an air of quiet authority, that drew his eye. She wasn't checking in at the main desk. Instead, a uniformed attendant immediately approached her. "Ms. Reed, good morning. Mr. Hawthorne is on his way. Your flight is fully prepared. Can I get you anything while you wait?" "Just an espresso, please, David." "Thank you," she replied, her voice calm and smooth. Mark's blood ran cold. Reed. He looked again, his mind struggling to connect this radiant, powerful woman with the memory of his mousy beige wife. The chic bob, the confident set of her jaw. It was Amelia. But it was an Amelia he had never seen before, an Amelia he couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. Jessica followed his gaze. "Who is that? She looks important." Mark let out a short, incredulous laugh. He couldn't help himself. The old dynamic, the ingrained habit of diminishing her, kicked in. "Important. That's Amelia, my ex-wife." Jessica's eyebrows shot up. "That's the plain Jane you told me about, the one who redecorates kitchens. Looks like she got a makeover." Mark scoffed, though a strange, unsettling feeling was coiling in his gut. He felt a compulsive need to reassert his dominance, to put her back in the box he had created for her. He strolled over, adopting his most charming, condescending smile. "Amelia. Wow. Long time no see." Amelia turned her expression unreadable behind the dark glasses. She simply nodded. "Mark." Her lack of reaction unnerved him. He had expected surprise, maybe a flicker of old hurt. He got nothing. It was like acknowledging a piece of furniture. So he said, gesturing around the exclusive lounge, "This is a new scene for you. Trying a new look, I see. Who are you trying to impress? He lowered his voice conspiratorially. Did you win a contest? Or are you someone's new personal assistant? Good for you climbing the ladder. He thought the jab would land, that it would remind her of her place. But Amelia didn't even flinch. She took a slow sip of the espresso that had just been delivered to her on a small silver tray. Something like that, she said coolly. Mark felt a surge of smug satisfaction. He knew it. She was out of her depth, playing dress-up in a world she didn't belong in. He leaned in closer, his voice laced with mock concern. You know, I always worried about you after we split. I always said you were a bit plain for this kind of world. Too simple. You should be careful, Ames. It's easy to get chewed up and spit out by people you don't understand. It was the culmination of every belittling comment, every dismissive gesture from their entire marriage delivered with a final patronizing flourish. He was Mark Thompson, vice president, flying private. She was Amelia the dabbler, his cast-off. The natural order was as it should be. And then everything changed. Through the large windows overlooking the tarmac, a jet appeared. It wasn't a modest charter like Mark's. It was a Gulfstream G650, sleek and powerful, its pearlescent white paint gleaming even under the grey skiptie. Aircraft was the undisputed king of private jets, a symbol of unimaginable wealth and power. It taxied to a stop directly in front of their window. The door of the jet opened and a man descended the stairs. It was Alexander Hawthorne. Even from a distance he was unmistakable, a figure of immense presence. He strode towards the lounge, his focus singular. Mark felt his jaw go slack. Alexander Hawthorne, the CEO of Hawthorne Global, the most powerful man in real estate development in the world. He was Mark's idol, the titan he aspired to be. What was he doing here? Hawthorne entered the lounge, his eyes immediately finding Amelia. A warm smile transformed his serious features. Amelia, he said, his voice carrying easily across the room. Sorry I'm late. The traffic from the city was a nightmare. He completely ignored Mark, as if he were invisible. Not at all. Amelia replied, taking off her sunglasses. Her eyes, clear and bright, met Hawthorne's. It gave me time for a coffee. Hawthorne placed a light, familiar hand on the small of her back. Good. Ready for the site visit. The team in Monaco is waiting for us. I think you'll be very pleased with the foundation progress. Mark's brain short-circuited. Monaco. The site visit. Ms. Reed. The pieces clicked into place with the force of a shotgun blast. The news articles he'd skimmed. The buzz about Hawthorne's radical new choice for the Monaco project. Reed Designs. It was her, his Amelia. His plain, simple golden retriever, Amelia, was the lead architect on the most coveted project in the world. She wasn't an assistant. She wasn't playing dress-up. She was the talent. She was the one Alexander Hawthorne, his hero, had come to collect. Let's go, Amelia said to Alexander, turning her back on Mark without a second glance. As they walked towards the door, Alexander paused and looked back, his gaze finally falling on Mark. His eyes, cold and sharp, raked over him, taking in the rented Chet, the flashy girlfriend, the desperate ambition. He didn't know the history, but he understood the type. It was a look of utter dismissal, from a lion to a house cat. Mark stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape. He watched as Amelia, his Amelia, walked across the tarmac beside Alexander Hawthorne. He watched as she ascended the stairs to the G650. He watched as she paused at the top, turning for a moment, to look out at the horizon, a queen surveying her new domain. Then she disappeared inside. Mark. Our plane is ready. Jessica's voice was sharp, cutting through his stupor. Who was that guy? And why was he with your ex-wife? Her tone had changed. The admiration she usually had for him was gone, replaced by a new critical curiosity. Mark couldn't answer. He could only stare at the Gulfstream as its engines began to whine, a sound of pure power that vibrated in his bones. He had spent his entire life trying to project an image of success, desperately trying to get into the room where it happens. Amelia had just boarded a private jet to Monaco with the man who owned the room, and he, Mark Thompson, had just been exposed for what he truly was, a man left standing on the ground, looking up. The flight to Monaco was a world away from any commercial travel Amelia had ever experienced. The cabin of the Gulfstream was more like a luxurious flying apartment, with cream leather seats, polished wood paneling, and a cabin attendant who served them cappuccinos and freshly baked croissants. But for Amelia, the luxury was secondary. What truly mattered was the conversation. For hours, she and Alexander didn't engage in small talk. They spread architectural drawings across a wide table, debating sketching and refining the vision for the Hawthorne Elysian. He listened to her ideas with an intensity that made her feel like the most important person in the world. He valued her mind, not her appearance. This partnership was the antithesis of her marriage to Mark. It was a collaboration of equals, fueled by mutual respect and a shared creative fire. When they landed at the Nice Côte d'Azur airport, a private helicopter was waiting to whisk them along the glittering coastline to Monaco. From the air, Amelia saw the peninsula, where her design would soon rise. It was a breathtaking canvas of rocky cliffs and sapphire water. Seeing it, knowing her vision would transform this landscape, filled her with a sense of awe and profound gratitude. She wasn't just building a resort, she was sculpting a piece of the world. The days in Monaco were a whirlwind of productivity. She led meetings with international engineering teams, her voice confident as she articulated the complex technical requirements of her sustainable design. She walked the construction site in a hard hat and steel-toed boots, feeling a thrill as she saw the foundations being laid, the literal groundwork of her dream. In the evenings, she and Alexander would have dinner at quiet, elegant restaurants, their conversations flowing easily from work to life, art, and philosophy. A deep, unspoken connection was growing between them, one that transcended their professional relationship. It was slow, organic, and built on the solid foundation of who they truly were. Amelia's life had become unrecognizable from what it was a year ago. She had a thriving business, a team that respected her, and a project that would define her career. She had money, yes, but more importantly, she had purpose. She was no longer a reflection of a man's ambition. She was the source of her own. One evening, back in her New York office, working late on a new set of renderings, her phone buzzed with a text from an unsaved number. "Amelia, it's Mark. I saw the article about you in Forbes. Incredible. I can't believe it. I am so unbelievably proud of you. I know I was a fool. I think about you all the time. Can we please get a coffee and catch up?" She read the message, a phantom of her past, reaching out into her vibrant present. A year ago, a message like this might have sent her reeling. It might have validated her, given her the apology she once craved. But now it felt pathetic. It was the desperate plea of a man who hadn't seen her value until the world assigned it a price tag in Forbes magazine. He wasn't proud of her. He was impressed by her success, and he wanted to be adjacent to it again. She thought about the man on the tarmac, his face a mask of shock and envy. She thought of his cutting words, plain, simple, golden retriever. And she contrasted it with Alexander, who had looked at her roughest sketches and seen a masterpiece. Amelia didn't feel anger or a need for revenge. She simply felt nothing. He was irrelevant. Her success wasn't for him. It was for the woman who had sat at a dusty drafting table in a small Brooklyn apartment and dared to draw a new future for herself. With a simple, decisive tap of her thumb, she blocked the number and deleted the message. She turned her attention back to the screen, to the beautiful, soaring lines of the building she was creating. She had blueprints to finalize. She didn't have time for ghosts. 6 months later, Amelia stood on a stage in Lisbon, Portugal. She was the keynote speaker at the World Architecture Festival, an honor reserved for the titans of her industry. The auditorium was packed with thousands of architects, students, and critics. In the front row, Alexander Hawthorne sat watching his expression, one of immense pride. She spoke for 45 minutes, not just about the technical aspects of the Hawthorne Elysian, but about her journey. She spoke of the importance of an authentic voice, of the danger of letting others define your worth, and of the courage it takes to tear down a life that doesn't fit to build one that does. Our greatest designs, she concluded, her voice ringing with passion and clarity, are not the buildings we create from steel and glass. They are the lives we build for ourselves from resilience, courage, and an unwavering belief in our own vision. Don't ever let anyone tell you that your canvas is too small or your colors are too plain. Be the architect of your own world. Build something magnificent. The auditorium erupted in a standing ovation. As the applause washed over her, Amelia looked out at the sea of faces, and then her eyes found Alexander's. He was smiling, not the smile of a CEO for his successful hire, but the smile of a man looking at the woman he admired and cherished. Later that evening, they walked along the banks of the Tagus River, the city lights twinkling on the water. "You were magnificent," he said softly. "I had a good mentor," she replied, smiling back at him. He stopped and turned to her, taking her hand. "Amelia, what we have, it's become more than a partnership, hasn't it?" "Yes," she said, her heart full. "It has." He didn't need to say more. In the quiet understanding that passed between them, she knew she had found something real. Not a life built on image or status, but a partnership built on a foundation of respect, admiration, and a shared vision for the future. She wasn't an accessory to his world, and he wasn't a prize for her success. They were two powerful, complete individuals who were choosing to build something new together. Looking out at the endless river, Amelia Reed, the woman, once dismissed as plain, knew she was exactly where she was meant to be in a life of her own, breathtaking design. 2 years later, the air in Monaco was thick with the scent of salt money and night-blooming jasmine. A symphony of languages, French, English, Italian, Russian, danced on the warm Mediterranean breeze, weaving through the strains of a live orchestra. This was the grand opening of the Hawthorne Elysian, and it was more than just a party. It was a global event. The world's media had descended, along with European royalty, Hollywood A-listers, tech billionaires, and the most influential figures in art and finance. They had all come to witness the unveiling of a new wonder. And at the center of it all stood its creator, Amelia Reed. She was on a wide cantilevered terrace that jutted out over the sea, the waves crashing gently against the illuminated cliffs below. Her design surrounded her, a living, breathing entity. The buildings did not dominate the landscape. They conversed with it. Walls of living green cascaded down towards the water rooftops, served as lush gardens under the moonlight, and infinity pools seemed to merge seamlessly with the sea, and the skylight was everywhere, soft, ambient, and cleverly reflected, making the entire resort feel both impossibly grand and intimately welcoming. It was the Bronx biome's philosophy writ large, a masterpiece of sustainable luxury. Amelia wore a deep sapphire gown that mirrored the color of the evening sea. It was a couturier's creation, but she wore it with the same easy confidence she now wore her own skin. Beside her, his hand resting lightly on her arm, was Alexander. They were no longer just a professional team. They were an established, formidable partnership. Their quiet affection for one another, a tangible presence. "I still can't quite believe it," she murmured, her gaze sweeping over the scene. She watched a famous actor she'd only ever seen on screen, laughing with his wife near one of her terraced gardens. She saw a family with 2 young children pointing up at the constellations from an observation deck she had painstakingly designed. "It's real. It all came out of my head. The greatest structures always begin as a single powerful idea," Alexander said, his eyes not on the resort, but on her. "You had the idea, Amelia. You did the work. This is the testament." A sense of profound, quiet joy settled over her. This wasn't the frantic, hollow validation she had once thought success would be. It was the deep, resonant satisfaction of creation. Her work was bringing beauty and peace into the world. It was a feeling Mark, with his focus on acquisitions and short-term gains, could never understand. The thought of him was fleeting, a distant echo from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in New York City, that echo was a deafening roar. Mark Thompson sat hunched over the sticky surface of a bar in a dimly lit tavern near Wall Street. It wasn't the kind of high-end cocktail lounge he used to frequent, but a place for weary, mid-level drones to drown their sorrows in cheap beer. His suit was off the rack, no longer bespoke. The Rolex was long gone, replaced by a functional, uninspired digital watch. His life had unraveled with shocking speed after the Teterboro incident. The illusion of his success had been as fragile as a house of cards, and Amelia's ascent had been the gust of wind that blew it all down. Jessica had left him within a month. "I thought you were a player, Mark," she'd said, her voice dripping with contempt. "But you're just a spectator with good seats, and it turns out your seats aren't even that good." His confidence, his swagger had been a performance fueled by his perceived superiority over Amelia. With that gone, he was just an average banker with an inflated ego. His colleagues sensed the shift. The deference he commanded vanished, replaced by pity and a touch of schadenfreude. He started making reckless trades, desperate to claw back his status, but his nerve was shot. He lost a key client, then another. Within a year, he was managed out of his firm, a polite term for being fired. He now worked for a small, struggling financial group, analyzing spreadsheets in a cubicle that smelled of stale coffee. Above the bar, a large flat-screen TV was tuned to a global news network. Usually it showed stock tickers and political debates. But tonight, it was broadcasting live from the most glamorous party in the world. Mark stared into his glass, trying to ignore it, but the reporter's excited voice cut through the bar's chatter. "Truly a triumph of modern architecture. The Hawthorne Elysian is being hailed as a new global landmark. And the visionary behind it is the surprisingly young architect Amelia Reed." Mark's head snapped up. The camera panned across a breathtaking view of the resort before focusing on an interview. It was her, Amelia. She was radiant, poised, speaking articulately about integrating biomimicry into commercial design. She looked directly into the camera, and for a heart-stopping moment, Mark felt as if she were looking right at him, right through him. Then Alexander Hawthorne joined her, and the reporter beamed. "Go to Hawthorne. Read, you two are not only professional partners, but personal ones as well. You are the definition of a power couple. What's the secret?" Alexander smiled and put his arm around Amelia. "The secret is simple," he said, his voice rich and clear. "I trust her vision completely, and I respect her mind. The rest just follows." Amelia leaned her head against his shoulder for just a moment, a small, genuine gesture of affection that spoke volumes. A man, a few stools down from Mark, whistled. "Damn," he said to the bartender. "Now that's class. Built on respect, not some flashy nonsense. They're the real deal." The words hit Mark like a physical blow. Built on respect. He had demanded loyalty, obedience, a reflection of his own glory. He had never once offered her true, unqualified respect. He had possessed a priceless treasure, and in his arrogance had dismissed it as a common stone. He hadn't just lost a wife, he had lost the chance at a life of substance, a partnership that could build worlds. He looked at the man on the screen, the titan he'd always wanted to be, and the woman beside him, the woman he had discarded. He saw what he had thrown away. It wasn't just the money or the fame. It was the light in her eyes, the passion in her voice, the quiet strength that came from being truly seen and valued. He drained his glass, the cheap beer bitter on his tongue. He was a ghost, haunting the edges of a world that had moved on without him. The party on the screen was a universe away, a dazzling constellation of success and happiness, and he was on the ground, shrouded in a darkness of his own making. Amelia's story isn't about getting revenge on an ex-husband who wronged her. His shock on that tarmac was just a footnote in her much larger journey. Her story is a powerful testament to the fact that our value is not determined by how others see us, but by how we choose to see ourselves. She was never plain. She was a masterpiece waiting for the right canvas, and she finally realized that canvas was her own life. By silencing the voices of doubt and embracing her own unique talent, she didn't just find success, she found herself. Her journey from being an invisible wife to a celebrated architect is a reminder that the most magnificent structures we can ever build are the lives we design with courage and authenticity.
What happens when a man's final cruel prophecy is shattered in the most spectacular way imaginable? For Emma Vance, the final words her celebrity ex-husband, Julian Thorne, ever spoke to her were a curse. "You're nothing without me. No one will ever want you. You will die alone." He said it with the smug certainty of a man who believed he had authored her entire existence. But what Julian didn't count on, what the world couldn't have predicted, was that the universe had a flair for irony. Less than 12 hours later, Emma Vance wouldn't just be fine. She'd be on the front page of every major news outlet, her name a global trending topic, all because of a single candid photograph, her hand held gently securely in the hand of the world's most enigmatic and untouchable billionaire. This isn't just a story about revenge, it's about what happens the morning after your world ends. The air in the penthouse was cold. It wasn't the fault of the climate control, a state-of-the-art system Julian Thorne had often boasted about in interviews for architectural magazines. It was a frigid, soul-deep cold that emanated from the man himself. Julian, with his perfectly coiffed silver hair and a smile engineered for talk show sofas, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the sparkling expanse of New York City, as if he owned it. In many ways, he thought he did. "It's all signed Emma," he said, not turning to look at her. His voice, the same one that calmed millions of his followers with platitudes about unlocking your inner power, was now clipped and sharp as a shard of glass. Emma Vance clutched the pen in her hand, her knuckles white. The final divorce paper sat on the vast marble island in the kitchen, a kitchen she had designed from the veining in the stone to the specific shade of brushed brass on the handles. It was a space meant for warmth, for laughter, for the life she thought they were building. Now, it was just a stage for her public execution. "I know, Julian," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. She hadn't slept in days. For 10 years, she had been Mrs. Thorne, the quiet, supportive wife of the self-help magnate Julian Thorne, author of the global bestseller, The Architect of You. She had been the one who edited his manuscripts until 3 in the morning, who fact-checked his research, who coached him through his anxieties before every major speech. She had sacrificed her own burgeoning career as an academic, specializing in Renaissance art, to build his empire, believing his success was their success. The cracks had started as hairline fractures. His casual dismissal of her opinions, his gaslighting her memories of events, the way he'd subtly mock her in front of their influential friends. Then came the affairs which he'd explained away as the unfortunate but necessary burdens of a man of his stature. The final break came when she discovered he wasn't just having an affair. He had a long-term partner, a younger, more malleable version of herself, already installed in a condo he'd bought downtown. Good, He finally turned his eyes, sweeping over her with disdain. She wore a simple grey cashmere sweater and jeans, a stark contrast to his tailored Zegna suit. She felt like a ghost in her own home. "The movers will be here tomorrow for my remaining effects. Your things? Well, you don't have much, do you? I'll have them put in storage. You have 30 days to collect them." Every word was a calculated blow. He knew her things were mostly books, research papers, and sentimental items from her family, things that held no monetary value to him. "Where am I supposed to go, Julian?" She asked the question, tasting like ash. The penthouse was in his name. The bank accounts had been systematically drained into trusts she couldn't access. Her lawyer, a timid man overwhelmed by Julian's legal Rottweilers, had managed to secure her a settlement that was, in Julian's world, pocket change. It was enough to live on for a year, maybe two, if she was frugal. It was an insult disguised as a severance package. He smirked, a cruel twisting of the lips that never reached his televised eyes. "I don't know, Emma. That's your problem now, isn't it? You wanted to be independent. So be independent." He walked over to the island, picking up his pristine leather briefcase. He didn't even glance at her. He was already moving on. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and shameful. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. She straightened her back, lifting her chin. "I will." Her defiance seemed to amuse him. He paused at the door, turning back for one final devastating volley. His face was a mask of mock pity. "You know, I almost feel sorry for you," he said, his voice dropping into the intimate conspiratorial tone he used on his podcasts. "You poured everything into me. You have no career, no connections of your own. You're, what, 36? Past your prime, darling. The world is a brutal place for women like you." He stepped closer, his expensive cologne suffocating her. He leaned, in his voice a venomous whisper, in her ear. "Let me give you one last piece of free advice, my dear ex-wife. No one will ever want you. You're nothing without me. You carry the stench of failure. Men of quality, men of substance, they want a winner. They don't want someone's discarded leftovers. You will die alone." He pulled back, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. He had delivered his curse. It was the final brick in the wall he had built around her heart. And then he was gone. The heavy door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the cavernous empty space. For a long moment, Emma didn't move. She just stood there, his words slithering into the cracks of her broken confidence. "No one will ever want you. You will die alone." She finally let out a ragged sob, collapsing against the cold marble. The city lights outside blurred into a cruel, glittering mockery. Julian was right. She had given him her youth, her intellect, her loyalty. And in return, he had taken her name, her home, her future, and left her with nothing but a curse ringing in her ears. In that moment, sitting alone in the ruins of her life, she believed him. The next few weeks were a blur of beige. Beige boxes, beige walls of a tiny third-floor walk-up in Brooklyn, and a beige, flavorless existence. Emma had found the apartment in a daze. It was all she could afford. The grand views of Central Park were replaced by a view of a brick wall and a perpetually overflowing dumpster. The scent of fresh orchids Julian insisted on was replaced by the smell of damp old wood and her neighbor's cooking. She unpacked the few boxes Julian's men hadn't accidentally misplaced. Her books, her precious companions, filled makeshift shelves. Her research notes on the artist Artemisia Gentileschi, a female painter who had triumphed over immense personal violation and patriarchal oppression, felt like a cruel joke. Emma had once dreamed of writing the definitive book, on her. Now she could barely summon the energy to read the titles. Julian's curse echoed in the cramped space. No one will ever want you. It became the soundtrack to her lonely nights. She'd scroll through social media, a masochistic ritual. Julian was thriving. He was photographed with A-list actors giving talks at prestigious conferences, and his new girlfriend, a model named Crystal, was splashed across his Instagram, always laughing, always perfect. He had already rewritten their history, painting himself as the patient husband who had finally freed himself from a negative and uninspiring partner. His followers lapped it up, flooding his comments with praise for his strength and authenticity. Emma's only lifeline was Chloe Davies. Chloe, a sharp-tongued, fiercely loyal art gallery owner, had been her friend since college. She'd never liked Julian, calling him a self-help vampire who drains the life out of everyone and sells it back to them in a paperback. Chloe showed up one Friday evening, armed with 2 bottles of expensive wine and a container of pad thai. She took one look at the apartment, and Emma's gaunt face and her expression hardened. "Okay, that's it," Chloe declared, setting the food on a wobbly IKEA table. "The moping is officially over. Operation Phoenix begins now." Emma gave a weak smile. "I don't feel much like a mythical bird, Chloe. More like a pigeon with a broken wing." "Nonsense," Chloe said, pouring a generous glass of Sancerre. "You are Emma Vance. You can spot a forged Botticelli from 20 paces, and you can recite Vasari's Lives of the Artists backwards. That sociopath didn't give you your brain. He just tried to convince you not to use it. We just need to remind you who you are." Chloe talked for hours, her voice filling the quiet apartment with life. She spoke of new artists, of gallery openings, of the vibrant world that Emma had been cut off from. Slowly, tentatively, Emma found herself engaging, correcting a point Chloe made about the use of lapis lazuli in the Scrovegni chapel, the old fire of her intellect flickering faintly. "See, she's still in there," Chloe said, pointing at her with a shrimp-laden fork. "Now for the main event." She reached into her designer tote bag and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. The cardstock was heavy, expensive. The calligraphy was elegant. "What's this?" Emma asked. "This," Chloe said with a flourish, "is your re-entry into the world. It's the St. Jude's Foundation Annual Benefit Gala, the biggest art world event of the fall. They're auctioning off a recently discovered Degas sketch. Everyone who is anyone will be there." Emma recoiled as if the envelope were on fire. "Chloe, no, I can't. What would I wear? Who would I talk to? Julian will be there. He's a patron." "First," Chloe said, ticking the points off on her fingers, "I have a friend at Marchesa who owes me a colossal favor. You will be dressed in a gown that will make angels weep. Second, you will talk to me. And third, screw Julian. Seeing you there looking magnificent and not giving a damn about him will be like a stake through his narcissistic heart. It's the perfect revenge." "I don't want revenge, Chloe. I just want to be invisible." "Too bad," Chloe countered. "Invisibility is cancelled. You've spent a decade in the shadows. It's time to stand in the light. Not for him, not for anyone else. For you. Remember the woman who wanted to write the Gentileschi book? The one who was passionate and brilliant? She wouldn't hide from a bully in a bespoke suit. She'd face him." Emma looked at the invitation. The St. Jude's Foundation. The very name felt like a sign. She thought of Julian's parting words, the poison of his curse. "You will die alone." Maybe he was right. Or maybe, just maybe, Chloe was. Maybe the only way to break a curse was to defy it. She took a deep breath, the first one that felt like it reached the bottom of her lungs in months. "Okay," she said, her voice stronger than it had been all evening. "Okay, I'll go." Chloe's smile was triumphant. "That's my girl. Now let's finish this wine. We have a phoenix to raise from the ashes." The ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a galaxy of glittering chandeliers and even more glittering people. The air hummed with the low thrum of powerful conversations, scented with expensive perfume and ambition. Emma felt a wave of vertigo. For years, she had navigated these events at Julian's side, a silent accessory. Tonight, she was on her own, and it was terrifying. Chloe, true to her word, had worked magic. The Marquesa gown was a masterpiece of midnight blue silk that shimmered with every movement. It was elegant, understated, and fit her as if it were spun just for her. Her hair was swept up in a loose romantic chignon, and for the first time in a long time, the woman staring back at her from the reflection in a champagne flute looked not like a victim, but like herself. "Stop hiding behind the ficus," Chloe hissed, pulling her gently by the arm. "You look like a goddess. Own it." They circulated Chloe, greeting people with air kisses and sharp witticisms. Emma managed a few polite smiles, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. She kept scanning the crowd for Julian, a primal sense of dread coiling in her stomach. The auction began. The auctioneer, a man with a plummy British accent and a theatrical flair, charmed the room into parting with extraordinary sums of money for art vacations and experiences. Emma found herself genuinely captivated by the art, her professional eye assessing the works, her mind momentarily distracted from her anxiety. The main event was the Degas sketch, a delicate, intimate drawing of a ballerina tying her shoe. Bidding was fierce, paddles shooting up across the room. Emma watched mesmerized when she saw him. Julian. He was sitting at a prominent front table, his arm possessively around Crystal's chair, his paddle held high. He wanted the Degas. Of course he did. It was a trophy. Emma felt a chill and turned away, needing to escape. "I need some air," she murmured to Chloe, slipping away from their table towards a set of French doors that led to a small, secluded terrace. The cool night air was a balm. The terrace was blessedly empty, overlooking a quiet courtyard garden. She leaned against the balustrade, closing her eyes, trying to will away the image of Julian's smug face. This was a mistake. She wasn't ready. "It's a beautiful piece, isn't it, the Degas?" The voice was deep, calm, and startlingly close. Emma's eyes snapped open. A man was standing a few feet away, half hidden in the shadows, looking not at her, but out at the garden. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, but he wore it with a kind of casual indifference, as if it were a second skin. "Yes," Emma found herself saying, her voice a little breathless. His use of line, "It's so economical, but it captures the entire weight and strain of the moment. It's not just a pretty picture." The man turned his head slightly, and she caught a glimpse of his profile in the dim light. Strong jaw, thoughtful eyes, an air of quiet intensity that was the polar opposite of Julian's performative charisma. There was something familiar about him, but she couldn't place it. "Most people just see the ballerina," he said, his gaze now on her. His eyes were a startling shade of grey, like a stormy sea. "You see the work." A blush rose on her cheeks. It was the first time in years anyone had seen her, and not the woman standing next to Julian Thorne. I studied art history. It was my field." Was he asked, a note of genuine curiosity in his voice? She corrected herself, a spark of her old self igniting. "It is my field." He smiled, a small, genuine smile that transformed his serious face. "Good. An awkward yet not uncomfortable silence fell between them. From inside, they could hear the auctioneer's voice rising to a crescendo. "Sold to Mr. Julian Thorne." Emma flinched, the sound of his name a physical blow. She wrapped her arms around herself, the cold returning. The stranger's perceptive eyes missed nothing. "You know him," he stated. It wasn't a question. She gave a wry, bitter laugh. "He's my ex-husband. The divorce was finalized yesterday." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. She instantly regretted it. Why was she dumping her baggage on this handsome stranger? But he didn't recoil or offer empty platitudes. He just nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," he said, and it sounded like he actually meant for the turmoil, not for the divorce itself. She shook her head, trying to dismiss it. "It's fine. I should go back inside." "Wait," he said, taking a step closer. The space between them seemed to crackle with an unexpected energy. "My name is Alistair." He extended his hand. She placed hers in it. His grip was warm, firm, and surprisingly gentle. A jolt, like a static shock, shot up her arm. "Emma," she replied. "Emma," he repeated as if testing the name on his tongue. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Emma, who sees the work." He held her hand for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. As she turned to walk back inside, her heart doing a strange, unfamiliar flutter, he spoke again, his voice soft. "For what it's worth, he didn't deserve that sketch. He only sees the ballerina." Emma walked back into the ballroom, her mind reeling. She didn't see the rest of the auction. She didn't even notice when Chloe returned to the table. She was consumed by the brief, intense connection with the man on the terrace, Alistair. As the gala wound down, Chloe helped her navigate the exit. They were waiting for their car when a flurry of activity erupted near the main entrance. A swarm of paparazzi, who had been waiting for a politician to leave, suddenly turned their lenses towards the doors. Alistair emerged. And suddenly, Emma understood. The flashes were blinding. Shouts of his name echoed in the night. Alistair Sterling. The Alistair Sterling. The reclusive tech billionaire. The prodigy who had made his fortune in sustainable energy and now ran the Sterling Foundation, one of the world's largest philanthropic organizations. He was notoriously private, rarely photographed, and his presence here was a major event. He seemed unfazed by the chaos, his expression impassive, as his security team tried to clear a path. His gaze swept the crowd, and for a heart-stopping moment, his eyes met Emma's. There was a flicker of recognition, a ghost of the smile she'd seen on the terrace. Chloe was gaping. "Oh my God, you were talking to Alistair Sterling, the great white whale of the Forbes list." Before Emma could answer, the crowd surged. A clumsy photographer stumbled backward, bumping into Emma and sending her off balance. She gasped, expecting to fall, but a strong hand shot out and caught her arm, steadying her. Another hand instinctively found hers, lacing their fingers together in a firm, protective grip. It was Alistair. He had broken from his security cordon and was suddenly right there, his body shielding hers from the jostling crowd. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and concerned, meant only for her. She could only nod, speechless. The world seemed to slow down. The roar of the paparazzi, the shouting, it all faded into a dull hum. All she could feel was the warmth of his hand, the solid presence of him next to her. It lasted only for a few seconds. His security team quickly enveloped them, guiding them towards a waiting black sedan, a car far more imposing than the Uber they had called. He opened the back door, still holding her hand, and looked at her. "Let me give you a ride," he said. It wasn't a request. Dumbly, she nodded again, and slid into the plush leather interior. Chloe scrambled in after her, wide-eyed. Alistair followed, and the door shut with a heavy, satisfying thud, sealing them in a cocoon of silence. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the flashing lights behind. Emma looked down. Her hand was still linked with his. Across the street, hidden in the shadows, a freelance paparazzo, who had missed the main scrum, lowered his camera. He hadn't gotten a clear shot of Sterling's face, but he'd gotten something else, something intimate and intriguing. A close-up of their hands perfectly intertwined, a story in a single frame. He smiled. This was better than a politician. This was gold. Emma woke up to the sound of a hurricane. Not a literal one, but the digital tempest of her phone vibrating violently on her bedside table. It buzzed and chirped with a relentless, frantic energy she'd never experienced before. Groggily, she reached for it, her mind still fuzzy from the surreal events of the previous night. Alistair's driver had dropped her and Chloe off, a polite and formal goodbye hanging in the air. The feeling of his hand in hers lingered like a phantom limb. She squinted at the screen. 347 new text messages, 98 missed calls, a torrent of notifications from Instagram, Twitter, and news apps she didn't even remember installing. Her blood ran cold. This was the kind of attention Julian received, not her. Her thumb trembled as she swiped to open a text from Chloe. It was a string of incoherent capital letters and a link. Chloe, Emma. Oh my God, holy Sikh, look at this now. With a deep sense of foreboding, she clicked the link. It took her to the homepage of TMZ. And there it was. The lead story. The photograph. It was an artful shot, tightly framed and undeniable. Two hands. Her hand, recognizable by the delicate silver ring her grandmother had left her, was entwined with a man's larger, stronger hand. The cuff of a tuxedo and a sliver of an impossibly expensive-looking watch were visible. The headline screamed, "Mystery Woman, Reclusive Billionaire, Alistair Sterling, in Shockingly Public Romance." She dropped the phone as if it had burned her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She scrambled to open other news sites. Page 6. The Daily Mail, Vanity Fair. It was everywhere. The same photo. The same breathless speculation. Who is Alistair Sterling's secret girlfriend, the handhold seen round the world? Sources say the woman is a stunning brunette who spent the evening at the St. Jude's Gala with the tech mogul. She was the mystery woman, the stunning brunette. It felt like she was reading about a character in a novel, not herself. Then her stomach dropped as she saw the comments section. The digital mob was already at work. Sleuths were trying to identify her. And then someone did. A gossip columnist with a long memory posted a picture of her from 3 years ago standing behind Julian at a book launch. The narrative shifted with whiplash speed. Update: Sterling's mystery woman, identified as Emma Vance, ex-wife of self-help guru Julian Thorne. And that's when the second storm hit. Julian's storm. He hadn't waited. He hadn't stayed silent. He had gone on the offensive with brutal surgical precision. He posted a statement on his Instagram, a platform with 20 million followers. It was a masterclass in manipulation, cloaked in his signature brand of faux vulnerability. The post was a picture of him looking pensively out a window, a cup of tea in his hands. The caption began, "Friends, many of you have been asking me about the recent news. It is with a heavy heart that I must address this. As you know, I have recently gone through a painful and private separation. I have tried to handle this with dignity and grace, wishing only the best for Emma. To see these photos today is deeply concerning. Emma felt sick. Concerned, I have always been a supporter of Emma, even as we grew apart. But I fear she is in a vulnerable place right now. To see her latch onto a man of such immense wealth and power so quickly, literally the day after our divorce was finalized, is alarming. I pray that she is not being taken advantage of, and that this is not a cry for help or a desperate attempt to fill a void. I am worried for her well-being. I will be making no further comment on this matter, as I wish to focus on healing. Please send her your positive energy. It was diabolical. In one fell swoop, he had painted her as a mentally unstable, desperate gold digger. He was the concerned, sensitive ex-husband. She was the pathetic, grasping woman. He had co-opted the language of therapy and wellness, a language she had helped him perfect, and turned it into a weapon against her. The comments were a tidal wave of vitriol aimed squarely at her. Wow, she didn't waste any time, did she, gold digger alert? Poor Julian, he's so classy, she's clearly a mess. I knew there was a reason he left her. She sounds like a parasite. Hope Alistair Sterling sees her for what she is. She's just using him for his money. The curse. You're nothing without me. No one will ever want you. He was making it come true, not by magic, but by the brute force of public opinion. He was branding her, defining her for the entire world, before she could even speak a word in her own defense. Her tiny apartment felt like it was closing in on her. The brick wall outside was a prison. She curled into a ball on her bed, the phone lying face down on the floor, still buzzing, still spewing poison. The shame was suffocating. He had won. He had utterly, completely destroyed her. She had defied his curse for one night, and in return, he had unleashed hell. The tears she had held back for so long finally came not as a gentle rain, but as a racking, hopeless storm. The knocking was soft at first, then more insistent. Emma ignored it, pulling a pillow over her head to block out the world. It was probably a reporter or a process server with a cease and desist letter from Julian's lawyers for besmirching his good name. Emma, it's Chloe. Open this door right now, or I'm calling the fire department and telling them I smell gas and a crazy woman with a vintage toaster. Reluctantly, Emma dragged herself to the door and unbolted it. Chloe swept in her face a mixture of fury and concern. She was holding a large bag from a fancy bakery and the morning papers, which she promptly threw in the trash. Don't read that garbage, she ordered. I've already seen it. That man is not a human being. He's a sentient, weaponized press release. Chloe took in Emma's tear-streaked face and crumpled form, and her expression softened. Oh, honey. She enveloped Emma in a hug. Don't you let him do this to you. Don't you let him win. He already has Chloe, Emma croaked. Look at what they're saying. The whole world thinks I'm some desperate, grasping social climber. He knew exactly what he was doing. Of course he did. Chloe said, her voice steely. This is his playbook. Control the narrative. Isolate the target. Publicly humiliate. He did it to that journalist who wrote a critical profile of him 2 years ago. Remember? He's a predator. Just then, Emma's intercom buzzed, making them both jump. Emma stared at it in terror. Don't answer it, she whispered. It could be the pizza I ordered for moral support, Chloe said, trying to lighten the mood. She pressed the button. Who is it? A calm, male voice, devoid of static, came through the speaker. It's Alistair Sterling. For Emma Vance. Emma and Chloe froze, staring at each other in disbelief. Alistair Sterling. Here, at her third-floor walk-up in Brooklyn. "Let him in," Chloe hissed, suddenly galvanized. "For God's sake, Emma, buzz him in." In a daze, Emma pressed the button. A few moments later, there was a quiet knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find him standing there. He was dressed not in a tuxedo, but in dark jeans, a simple gray t-shirt, and a lightweight jacket. He looked younger, less intimidating, but the same quiet intensity radiated from him. He was holding a small, unassuming cardboard box. "Miss Vance." "Emma," he said, his gray eyes searching her face. He saw the tear tracks, the fear. His expression wasn't one of pity, but of a kind of grim understanding. "I know this is an intrusion. May I come in?" She could only nod, stepping aside. He walked into her tiny living room, his presence making the space feel both smaller and safer at the same time. He glanced around at the bookshelves, his eyes lingering on the titles. "I came to apologize," he said, turning back to her. "My presence last night and my carelessness brought this circus upon you. I am truly sorry for that." "It's not your fault," Emma said, finding her voice. "It's his. It's my world that has invaded yours," Alistair countered, "and I have some experience with this, which is why I'm here." He placed the box he was carrying on her coffee table. "This is for you." She opened it cautiously. Inside was a sleek silver device. "It's a secure, encrypted satellite phone," he explained. "Untraceable, unhackable. My personal number is the only one programmed into it. Your current phone is a liability. The press can track it. It can be hacked. This is safe." Emma stared at him, bewildered by the practicality and foresight of the gesture. "I also saw his statement." Alistair continued, his voice hardening almost imperceptibly. "It was a cowardly and calculated attack. He is attempting to define you before you have a chance to define yourself. I will not allow that to happen." Chloe, who had been watching from the kitchen doorway like it was a tennis match, finally spoke up. "Damn right. But how do we fight back? He has 20 million followers who think he's the second coming." Alistair met Chloe's gaze, giving her a nod of respect. "You don't fight him on his battlefield. You don't sling mud. You render his attacks irrelevant by telling the truth, but on your own terms." He looked back at Emma, his focus entirely on her. "He's accused you of being a gold digger. So we show them you have no interest in my money. He's painted you as unstable. So we show them your strength and intelligence." A spark of anger, hot and clean, finally burned through Emma's despair. "He built his entire empire on my work." The words hung in the air. Alistair's expression sharpened. "What do you mean, his book?" Emma said, the story pouring out of her now. "The Architect of You. It was supposed to be my book. My dissertation was on the philosophical concept of the self in Renaissance art, how artists and thinkers of the time constructed their public and private personas. It was about authenticity, legacy, building a life of substance. I had a manuscript, years of research. Julian, he took it. He read it, simplified it, stripped out all the academic nuance, and repackaged it with pop psychology buzzwords. He stole my soul and sold it as a self-help guide." Chloe looked horrified. "Emma, you never told me it was that direct." "I was ashamed," Emma admitted. "And he convinced me that no one would ever believe me, that it was our project." Alistair was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. He looked from the pain in Emma's face to the bookshelves crammed with her life's passion. "Do you have proof?" he asked quietly. "Drafts, notes, emails." Emma's heart leaped. "Yes, they're in storage, old laptops, boxes of notes. I have everything." Alistair's expression was now one of cold, clear purpose. He was no longer just a handsome stranger or a reclusive billionaire. He was an ally, a powerful one. "Then, we have a new plan," he said. "We are no longer on the defensive. He wrote that he's concerned about you. Let's give him something to be genuinely concerned about." He looked directly at Emma, and for the first time, she saw not just kindness, but a deep, formidable strength that he was offering to share. "He tried to take your voice, Emma. I think it's time the world finally heard it." The next week was a whirlwind of covert operations and quiet strategy orchestrated from Alistair Sterling's minimalist Soho office, a place that felt more like a modern art gallery than a corporate headquarters. There were no reporters outside, no paparazzi. Alistair's world was protected by a level of security and discretion that was an art form in itself. His team, a small group of fiercely loyal and terrifyingly competent individuals, retrieved Emma's boxes from storage. They worked with a forensic IT specialist who recovered every draft, every time-stamped note, every email exchange from her old hard drives. They laid it all out on a large conference table, a mountain of evidence that traced the intellectual genesis of the architect of you directly and unequivocally to Emma. There were her early manuscripts full of complex academic arguments next to Julian's later dumbed-down versions with his handwritten notes in the margins changing her phrasing into marketable sound bites. It was a clear and damning paper trail of intellectual theft. Seeing it all laid out, Emma felt a profound sense of validation, followed by a surge of cold fury. "He didn't just steal my words," she said to Alistair, her voice shaking with emotion. "He stole my entire thesis on life. And then he used it to lecture the world and me about authenticity." Alistair stood beside her, his presence a steady anchor. Over the past few days, their alliance had deepened into something more. They'd spent hours talking not just about Julian, but about everything. She learned about his own past with the media, a vicious, untrue story about his family that had made him retreat from public life years ago. He learned about her passion for Artemisia Gentileschi, and he listened, truly listened, with an intensity that made her feel seen and heard in a way she never had with Julian. A quiet, powerful intimacy was growing between them, forged in the crucible of their shared crisis. "He won't get away with it," Alistair said, his voice low and resolute. "Now, we need to choose our moment." The moment presented itself a few days later. An invitation arrived for Julian to be the keynote speaker at the Global Integrity Summit, a Davos-like conference for tech leaders and media personalities. His topic, dripping with irony, was truth and transparency in the digital age. "It's perfect," Chloe said, her eyes gleaming. "It's his home turf. He'll feel untouchable. The hubris will be off the charts. He'll have the whole event locked down," Emma countered, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. "I can't just walk in and accuse him." "You won't have to," Alistair said. He tapped a few commands into his tablet. A picture of a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense haircut appeared on the screen. "This is Sarah Jenkins. She's moderating his keynote. She's one of the toughest investigative journalists in the business. She owes my foundation a favor for funding her documentary on dark money in politics. More importantly, she hates frauds." The plan was audacious. Sarah Jenkins, armed with a dossier of Emma's evidence, would conduct the Q&A after Julian's speech. She wouldn't ambush him with accusations. She would do it with his own words and with Emma's. The day of the summit, Emma felt sick with nerves. She wasn't at the conference hall. She was with Alistair and Chloe in a secure viewing suite nearby, watching the live feed on a massive screen. She had done her part. She had written a formal, eloquent statement and had given Sarah Jenkins her blessing to use her research, her words, her story. The broadcast began. There was Julian on a massive stage, bathed in a reverent blue light. He was at the peak of his powers, delivering a smooth, charismatic speech about the importance of living an authentic life. He even had the gall to reference his divorce. Recently, he said, his voice thick with false emotion, "I had to make a difficult choice to align my private life with my public values of honesty and growth. It was painful, but living your truth is never easy." Emma felt Alistair's hand find hers under the table. She gripped it tightly. Julian finished his speech to thunderous applause. He sat down beaming as Sarah Jenkins took the seat opposite him. She started with a few softball questions, lulling him into a state of comfortable arrogance. Then she shifted. "Julian, your book, The Architect of You, is built on a very powerful central metaphor of constructing a life. It's incredibly detailed. I was curious about your research process." Julian preened. "It was years of work, deep personal intellectual exploration. It really came from my soul." "Interesting," Sarah said, looking down at her notes. "Because I have here some academic papers from 2012, written by a then Emma Vance, that explore the exact same theme, the construction of persona in the Renaissance. The language is remarkably similar. For instance, you write, 'To be authentic is to be the sole architect of your own reality.' A fascinating turn of phrase. Almost identical to Ms. Vance's 2011 dissertation proposal, which states, 'The Renaissance ideal was to be the sole architect of one's public reality.'" A flicker of panic in Julian's eyes. The audience murmured. Sarah pressed on her voice like ice. "In Chapter 3, you discuss the facade of legacy, Ms. Vance's research uses the exact same term, the facade of legacy, in relation to the Medici family. On page 184, you use an anecdote about Michelangelo. That anecdote is lifted almost verbatim from an email Ms. Vance sent you in 2013, which we have a copy of. Shall I go on?" The color drained from Julian's face. He was sputtering, trying to interrupt. This is an ambush. My work with my ex-wife was a collaboration. She was my partner. Was she a collaborator when you registered the copyright solely in your name?" Sarah countered, her voice sharp. "Was she a collaborator when you pocketed the entirety of the 8-figure advance? We spoke to your publisher. Her name is not mentioned on any contract. In fact, we have a statement from Ms. Vance herself." And then on the giant screen behind the stage, a picture of Emma appeared. Not a paparazzi shot, but a professional, dignified headshot they had taken days before. Beside it, her statement began to scroll. "I am not a victim or a gold digger," the statement read. "I am a scholar. The core concepts, the research, and the intellectual framework of The Architect of You were my work. I am proud of that work, and I will not allow it to be used to promote a false narrative of authenticity, nor to be used as a weapon to publicly shame me. The truth, as Mr. Thorne is so fond of saying, has a way of coming out." The room was in stunned silence. Julian Thorne, the great guru of truth, was staring at the screen, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, live in front of his most important peers. He was being exposed not just as a liar, but as a thief. The cameras zoomed in on his face, no longer smug, but pale and sweating. The architect had been unmasked, revealing nothing but a hollow frame behind the beautiful facade. The reckoning had arrived. The silence in the conference hall was a living entity. It was thick, heavy, and absolute. On the massive screen, Julian Thorne's face, once a carefully curated mask of enlightened confidence, was now a canvas of pure, unfiltered horror. The camera operator, sensing a historic moment, held the close-up, refusing to cut away. The world watched as the architect of you was publicly deconstructed beam by rotten beam. He didn't just look guilty, he looked erased. In the quiet viewing suite, the only sound was the sharp intake of Chloe's breath. Emma sat perfectly still, her hand held firmly in Alistair's. She wasn't watching Julian's face. She was watching the words on the screen. Her words, her truth, finally illuminated for all to see. It wasn't a feeling of triumph that washed over her, but one of profound, solemn relief, like a patient taking their first breath after a long and suffocating fever. The noise in her head, the constant echo of Julian's gaslighting, and her own self-doubt had finally ceased. Alistair squeezed her hand gently. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice low. Quiet, she whispered, a small, wondering smile touching her lips. "The storm. I think it's finally over." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture of profound respect. "No," he said, his grey eyes soft but resolute. "The storm is just beginning for him. For you, this is the dawn." The fallout was a digital tsunami. Before Julian could even be escorted off the stage by stunned event staff, the clip was being sliced, diced, and shared across every platform. Thorne fraud. The Great Pretender and his stand with Emma Vance exploded globally. The initial trickle of outrage became a flood. Celebrities who had once touted his book as their Bible posted hurried statements of condemnation. Brands that had sponsored his podcast issued press releases severing all ties. His publisher, facing a public relations nightmare, released a statement within 3 hours. "In light of new information regarding the authorship of The Architect of You, we are immediately suspending all promotion and distribution of the title and will be conducting a full review of our relationship with Mr. Thorne." It was corporate speak for a public execution. Crystal, his model girlfriend, quietly deleted every photo of him from her Instagram feed. His powerful friends stopped returning his calls. The machine that had protected and promoted him turned on him with merciless efficiency. The final humiliating image came a week later, a grainy paparazzi photo of Julian unshaven and haggard in a wrinkled tracksuit, frantically putting trash bins out in front of his empty penthouse. The man who had preached about designing one's life looked like he had lost the blueprint to his own. Emma, however, refused to get drawn into the spectacle of his demise. While the world feasted on the schadenfreude she and Alistair were building, her new legal team, a phalanx of New York's sharpest minds funded by Alistair, moved with swift precision. The settlement meeting wasn't a negotiation. It was a dictation of terms. Emma sat at the head of the table, calm and composed, as her lawyers laid out the undeniable evidence of intellectual property theft and demanded reparations, not alimony, but a figure representing her share of the book's profits and damages for copyright infringement. Julian's legal team, knowing they were beaten, folded without a fight. With the first transfer of funds, she didn't buy a new apartment or a new wardrobe. Her first act was to sign the charter for the Vance Institute for Historical Studies. Its mission was clear: to fund and promote the work of scholars, particularly women, in fields historically dominated by men. Its first grant was awarded to a young art historian, who had discovered compelling evidence that a famous sculpture attributed to a 17th century master was in fact the work of his uncredited and forgotten sister. Her next meeting was with the acquisitions editor of a prestigious university press. The editor, a woman with kind eyes and a deep respect for academia, didn't just want to publish her original manuscript on Gentileschi. She wanted to publish a new expanded edition. "We also want you to write a new introduction," the editor said, "about your journey, about what it means to reclaim a narrative, your story. It's as important as the history you write about." For the first time, Emma cried. Not tears of sorrow or anger, but of overwhelming gratitude. Throughout it all, Alistair was her silent, steadfast partner. He never overshadowed her, never spoke for her. He simply created a space where she could be heard. Their relationship, born in the glare of a media firestorm, settled into a rhythm that was quiet, private, and deeply authentic. One evening, he came to her small Brooklyn apartment, the apartment she had decided to keep a reminder of, where she had started her new life. He found her covered in flour, attempting to bake bread, her tiny kitchen a chaotic mess. He didn't laugh at the mess. He simply rolled up the sleeves of his expensive shirt, washed his hands, and started helping her knead the dough. "You know," he said, his hands working alongside hers, "my life was very orderly before I met you. Every minute scheduled, every interaction vetted. I'm sorry for disrupting it," she said with a small smile. "Don't be," he replied, stopping to look at her, his eyes serious. "It was orderly, but it was grey. You brought the color back, Emma. You make the noise of the world bearable." A few months later, they stood on the terrace of his penthouse. It was a crisp autumn evening, and the city lights spread out below them like a carpet of fallen stars. The space, unlike Julian's cold, minimalist trophy home, was warm and lived in, filled with books stacked on every surface and art that was challenging and personal. He handed her an advance copy of her book, The Power of Persona Artemisia Gentileschi and the Forging of a Legacy, by Dr. Emma Vance. Her name, her title, her work. She ran her fingers over the embossed letters. "I used to stand in a place just like this and feel like the smallest person in the world," she confessed, her voice soft. "He told me that I was nothing without him, that I would die alone." Alistair wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her close. "He was a fool," he murmured into her hair. "A man that insecure could never understand a woman like you. He didn't understand the irony of his own curse." Emma leaned back against his chest, finally understanding. "He thought it was an ending," she said, a sense of wonder in her voice. "But it was a catalyst. If he hadn't said those things, if he hadn't pushed me out so cruelly, I would never have gone to that gala. I would never have met you. I would never have found the courage to fight for my work." Julian's curse wasn't a prophecy. It was an accidental gift. His attempt to consign her to oblivion was the very thing that had forced her into the light. He had meant to be the architect of her destruction, but instead, he had merely laid the foundation for her magnificent reconstruction. She turned in Alistair's arms, looking up at him. The love she saw in his eyes was not the possessive, conditional affection she had once known, but a deep, quiet partnership built on mutual respect and a shared truth. The city lights below no longer seemed to mock her, but to celebrate with her. It was a new dawn, bright and clear, and infinite with promise. And it was all hers. Emma Vance's story is a powerful reminder that our worth is never determined by someone else's opinion, especially the opinion of those who try to diminish us. It's a testament to the fact that the end of one chapter, no matter how painful, is often the necessary prelude to a far better one. Her journey from a cursed ex-wife to a celebrated scholar, hand in hand, with a man who saw her for who she truly was, shows us that the most profound comebacks are rooted in reclaiming our own truth and our own voice. Julian's curse was meant to be her prison, but it became the key that unlocked her true potential.